Hi, it's Deborah Hamilton. Welcome again to the MAAP community, making a plan for your pets so that their journey, if something happens to you, is already in place and they have a soft landing. I'm Deborah Hamilton, and I'm so glad all of you are here. So let me check in with everyone who's here. I know that Sally is traveling today. Actually, she's already traveled. She's in Arizona. And Susan, how is Maggie and everyone?
Maggie, we're just working really hard to try to ignore the bad behavior and, just reward the good behavior. And I've seen a little improvement here and there, trying to implement as many suggestions as I can. And, she's a barker, and a biter, but I think she's salvageable. And I wanted to take her to a camp, like a day camp where she could run off, but I think I would miss her too much if she was gone.
In fact, I know sometimes it's a balancing act because, giving them some sort of stimulus that might shift their norm might be good, but then you would miss them while you were shifting their norm. So that's always a little bit difficult. So let me see if Jan's able to check in. How are you, Jan?
Oh, I'm good. I'm sorry. I'm just eating because I have a class right after this. So
no worries, please. I love that you're here. Thank you. I love that people come, even though they've got things to do. I had Harriet Budd write me because she wanted to talk about heat and travel and things like that, because some of us are going to the Irish Setter Club American National in Colorado, and some of us are traveling a very long way. I have a 24-hour drive to get there. So there's a certain number of things that I want to talk about tonight, because making a plan for your pet includes making a plan for your pet if you travel with your pet, not just if you travel without your pet. So, if you're traveling in the summertime, always make sure you have a fan in their crate, if they're in a crate, which hopefully they are, but there is a fan for them, because sometimes the air conditioning might not get to wherever they are in the back of the truck. So always have a fan there to help pull the air to them. I always have had a car that has had back air conditioning, rear vents. So I usually in 90-degree weather would be wearing a sweatshirt in my car because my car would be so cold. So the dogs were all nice and cool and I was freezing to death. I've been blessed to be able to do that. But it really is important for you to understand that in the summertime and in the wintertime when it's really cold, you cannot leave your dogs unattended in a car for more than 30 seconds because it gets so hot in those cars, even with the windows open. I think I spoke last week about someone who lost their dogs who thought they had done everything perfectly in the heat. So really, it's not even worth taking the chance. It's not worth the, sale or going into McDonald's to get your meal. It's only going to be 5 minutes? Way too long, especially if you have a dog that is very susceptible to heat. So the things I wrote on the Irish Setter Club of America Facebook page applies to all of us here. So if you're traveling with your pet, make sure you have a collar with their name on it, because it is the most important thing that will restore your dog. That will restore your dog to you. Now, I know some of us who are show people don't like the ridge that a collar leaves around the dog's neck. And I get that. I don't want to have the dog have a collar mark on their neck when they're in the ring either. However, if God forbid I have a car accident and my dog gets out, that collar might return him or her home. Now, they're microchipped as well, yes, but that's believing that the person who gets my dog or finds my dog brings them to a veterinarian who has the ability to scan them. Good Samaritans are everywhere, and I always think the best of everyone, absolutely. But just in the event somebody really likes my Irish Setter and thinks they are the most beautiful dog they've ever seen, and they live in the backwoods in North Carolina, and no one will ever know that they kept my dog, I really want to make sure. I mean, the collar they can take off, so it's a little bit of a help. Maybe it would make them feel guilty. However, I really believe in collars on the dogs, but if not collars on the dogs, crate bags. I have a friend, Melanie Porter, who has Ziploc bags that she puts on them. I like to use the clear pencil or pen bags that you get for your kids when they go back to school that they put in their binders, because it has a zipper and you can put all the health information for that dog in that zippered compartment, folded up. And you can put a 3x5 card that says, this is Junie. Junie belongs to Deborah Hamilton. Deborah Hamilton should be in the car with Junie, but if she isn't, then they're to call Jim Hamilton, who's not in the car, or Drew Hamilton, who's not in the car, or Thomas Hamilton, who's not in the car, or, you know, Susan Capuano, who lives in Kentucky, where I happen to be right now, because the other part that I put in was you should have all the information for your dog attached to their crate, because that way law enforcement, you know, emergency care can get your dog from point A to point B if you're driving cross country and something happens. If you have a car accident, you know, we talked about this when I had the flat, but, you know, it really bears discussion again, because this is something you need to do. And even if you're going to the grocery store, make sure you put something in your car to make sure people know your pets are at home. We talked about that as well. I also talked about taking extra bottled water with you, because it's very important. If you go from place to place, you can't get water. Sometimes, and I know Junie is really susceptible to it, because here in North Carolina, our water is well water, and it definitely has an odor. We have triple filter, so it doesn't have much of an odor now, but he definitely can't tolerate this water. So much to my husband's chagrin, he is on bottled water because it really upset his belly. And maybe I'll try it again after we're here for a while, but he really had a negative reaction to the water in the house. So you've got to remember that while you're traveling with your pet. Make sure if you are traveling and you belong to a breed club, bring your membership directory with you, because you really want to be able to find the people in Kentucky, in Ohio, in Colorado, I guess I'm passing through Kansas and Missouri. I want to know who's in that neck of the woods in case I need somebody to take my dogs, because that's something very important. I'm always the kind of person who wants to reach out for those people before I leave and say, are you going to be around? And can I use you as a reference? Because for them to come and get your dogs, if you're, say, unconscious or something and can't say that Jan's going to be the person who's going to come and get my dogs, animal care and control may not necessarily release them. However, if you have looked in the bag and you say, I'm just going to put Jan down because she lives in Missouri and hopefully she'll be able to do it. I always say check with her first, but at least there's someone there who's a member of your breed club, knows your dogs, and hopefully will be able to at least facilitate the next step for your dogs if something happens to you. And I also requested everyone to make sure that they had easily accessible the owners of dogs who are in your car that don't belong to you. So there are a ton of handlers going to the National. You really need to know who these people are, who are owners of these dogs, if something were to happen to you. It's really, really important. So those are some of the key tips I gave on the Irish Setter Club of America Facebook page, because all of us are getting ready to travel. Quick synopsis for those of you who are late: take your membership book with you so you know who's nearby to get your dog if in fact something happens. Make sure you have information on your dog's crate, on your dog, and on your dash, and make sure the people who are going to come to help you in an emergency will not be in the car with you. That really stinks. I love when people say, well, I have myself, my assistant and our kennel girl. Well, they're all in the truck with you. And if you have an accident with the truck, they're not necessarily going to be able to take care of the dogs. So really, that's not something that will be helpful to you if something happens. So I hope that helps. So that's the traveling this summer with your pets. Make sure you are prepared. Oh, and bring water. So welcome, Connie. I'm so glad you're back. How are you doing?
I am fine, thank you. I'm sorry I'm late. In fact, speaking of national specialties, I got way late on a call talking about meal pricing. So that's what comes with God help me being the treasurer. But at any rate, very much on everybody's minds is, traveling with our dogs this summer and what happens if there's an emergency. I think I shared last week that a very dear friend of mine went up to Portland with her 6-month-old Belgian turf puppy, had a wonderful time, came home with a roaring case of COVID and had to drive all the way home from Portland to LA. So,
wow.
Yeah, that is, she could have not made it. And then she and her dog would have been stuck. So that's a perfect example of what you're talking about.
Right. Bring the directory with you. Call somebody who's there who might be able to at least maybe put you up, or at least put your dog up if you have to go to a hotel and quarantine for a while. You know,
Right.
it just is really important taking that drive. I know we all are supermen and women. However, sometimes we need to really take a minute. Jan, you raised your hand. What's up, hon?
No, so I just wanted to chime in because I wrote that article that I sent to you, and there were a few things in there which I think were important. And one was, wherever you're going, have the name of a vet and an emergency vet. Just because I've traveled recently, and the last thing you want to have to happen when your pet isn't feeling well or they get injured is to have to look for a vet. Yeah. Because you're in a panic. And so I'm a huge advocate of that. I've traveled with Tonka a number of times, and Tonka's skittish and he's not good in new environments. So even though I am a huge crate advocator when I'm home, I always travel with a crate, because one is, if I leave him in the hotel room, first of all, I don't want him to be destructive because I don't want to have to pay for the hotel.
You don't want him to eat the hotel. That would be really
I don't want him to eat the hotel. And I also, if he's making a lot of noise and somebody comes in to the room, like if they call the front desk and somebody comes in, or let's say maid service comes in or something, I don't want them, even though most of the time I'm really good about putting out the do not disturb sign, but just in case they did need to enter the room, I think that it's always a great idea. Little things like, I'm sure everybody knows, but if you do leave your dog in a hotel, make sure the front desk has your information. Because I was in a hotel once where the smoke alarm went off. And then all of a sudden, I ran back, but. Yeah,
but you could have been out to dinner off premises and then you wouldn't have known. And
you would have, or my cell phone could have.
Yep.
That's right. Or my cell phone could have been off.
Yep.
Or something, and then somebody would not have been able to reach me. And then one thing that I took from here recently was I only have a tag on Tonka's collar. Like it has, it has my name on it, has my cell phone number, has his name on it. But actually for travel, I actually got one which actually has his name on the collar itself, in addition to having the tag, because I figured if the tag falls off, and he's microchipped, but if the tag falls off, I don't want somebody to have to question, if his name is on it fully with my number, then
that is perfect. I have that as well. And I really toyed with that idea. I'd love to hear what Connie has to say, because I don't want anyone to know what my dog's name is if they want to say they know the dog. So it's this is my lawyer brain in my head spinning around. Should I put Hamilton, because that's my name, right? And it's always going to be Juniper Hamilton wherever he goes. However, putting Juniper on it would enable someone with nefarious intentions to call my dog by his name, and people say, well, it must be her dog. She knows the dog's name. So it's up to you. I have Juniper and my telephone number on Juniper's collar, like you do, Jen. You have Tonka's name and your telephone number embroidered, or whatever they do into the collar. It's, all of the big companies have it. And I have that, but I have been thinking about that, because when I had tags, I only used Hamilton. And I don't know what made me change my mind and use names. God only knows. But it's something to think about, only because, as I said at the beginning, if somebody's going to keep your dog and not take it, if it has a microchip, if you don't have a collar on, that's a problem. But if you have a collar on, then they know the name, and that's a problem too. What do you think, Connie? Weigh in here, because, it is sort of it's a waiting game, because we want to make sure our pets are cared for and identified, because you want to know this is Juniper, and that's what it says on the crate. However, what do we do?
Well, I microchip my dogs when they're pups.
Right.
That's first off. But I always have their names and my landline and my cell phone on their collar. I have my dogs are licensed in Los Angeles County, because I have exemptions for them as show dogs, which fortunately the county will do. Not every city in California will, but LA County will give you an exemption for, of course, a higher fee. But nonetheless, you don't necessarily have to go through the spay neuter to license your dog. So they've got their name, my 2 phone numbers, they've got the LA County license tag, and then they have a little tag on their collar with AKC Reunite as an example, with their registration number on it,
Right.
and the phone number for AKC Reunite, and or the microchip company,
Yeah,
Home Again
that's
or
really
whatever it is.
Those are really important tags to have. I here in North Carolina, we have no registration requirements. I immediately went to town hall to pay my fee and register my dog, and they go, "We don't do that." And I went, "Oh, okay." So,
Really?
Jan, do you have another question? Your hands up. I just want to make sure I don't miss you. Okay, so yeah, they have nothing. So I'm a little at a loss. I do have rabies things and things like that. But I think if we're going to be doing the perfect world, we should have a tag on the collar as well as, I believe, the name on the collar, because then either your last name, if you don't want to identify the dog, which of course I get to be a little Jekyll and Hyde over that. What's the best thing to do? But definitely having the ability to let people know the dog is microchipped is key. Before I go to Kieran, who I'm going to go to in 2 minutes, Kieran. So think of what you're going to say. How are you, my friend?
That was a quick 2 minutes.
Yeah. Well, I was going to do 2 minutes of something, but I think I'd rather check in with you. I'm going to do the MAAP thing in a minute because Harriet Budd asked me, are you going to talk about stuff or are you going to talk about the MAAP plan? And I sort of think everything we always talk about on these Wednesday night calls have a piece of information that helps you understand how important the MAAP plan is. So that's why I was going to just go over it again. But go ahead, Kieran, how are you? What are you up to?
All good. Just the usual, nothing unusual.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Sometimes the same is good. I'm sort of feeling that way myself. I have the same for the rest of this week, and then all hell breaks loose as I leave for the National on the 31st. So it'll be craziness personified. But I will be here on Wednesday. I won't be here Wednesday the 8th because that's when we have our formal veterans competition sweepstakes, and so we all get dressed up in formal wear and have a big dinner with desserts and everything for the veterans and celebrate the veterans. And there isn't a dry eye in the room. Tissues flow all over the place because we have from 7-year-olds to sometimes 13, 14-year-olds running around the ring. And we all celebrate them because at one time they were like Junie, they were 5.5 years old, and now they're 10 or 11 or 12, and they seem to think they're still 5.5 years old. So they might have a little hitch in their giddy up like I do. However, when everybody starts clapping, they have no hitch in their giddy up to them, and they go around that ring as if they are still 5.5 years old and just showing their oats. So that I won't be here on the 9th. Rose will send out the notes to make sure that everybody knows, simply because I can't be in two places at one time, and it'll be craziness. But what I do want to talk about, just so everyone who's listening, who will join us hopefully one day, the MAAP plan stands for a program that you need to make for the care of your pets so they have a soft landing if something happens to you. First of all, you got to sit down and make the plan you want for your pet. Do you want them to go to someone? Do you want them to go to a rescue? Do you want them to go, back to their breeder? What is it you want them to do? Well, you have to write that down because if you just speak it, that's great. However, it might not be followed. It might be followed, but it might not be followed because nobody knows if you've only spoken it. And if somebody comes up and says, well, Deborah told me she wanted this, doesn't necessarily mean that's what I said. And people might not believe, sort of like that name on the collar, Hamilton versus Juniper. Well, I think she wanted Juniper. No, I think she wanted Hamilton. So you'd have that debate. You want to address the needs of your pet. You want to appoint caregivers, so that's MAAP, and then you want to publish it. And I have to tell you, the most important piece of the MAAP plan is publishing it, because if Jan doesn't know I've appointed her as a caregiver, or Susan doesn't know that Jan and she are caregivers, then if something happens, the links in the chain are not as secure as you want them to be. So publishing it with your veterinarian, with your attorney, and with all the caregivers so they know each other is key. Tonight, we talk about I think it's up to 8 or 9 Ds. But Susan and I were talking at the beginning before we came on the air about disaster. We talk about disaster all the time here. So that would be fire, that would be flood, that would be tornadoes, it would be hurricanes. But it dawned on me last night as I was watching the unfortunate news, and 10 days ago when I was watching the unfortunate news in Buffalo, that you could go to the supermarket and not come home. And that's a disaster on so many levels that your pet is going to pay for, because something that you could not have even contemplated happened to you. And it doesn't just apply to the people who were victims. It applies to the people who are first responders. It applies to the people who are just in the store and may be emotionally affected by it. It applies to everyone in the vicinity. So if you consider that disasters come in all shapes and sizes, they come without warning. I mean, tornadoes usually come with warning now because we have such great atmospheric warnings. Hurricanes come with warnings. Fires mostly come with warnings unless the wind changes, right, Connie? But these kind of disasters don't come with warnings, and your pets are going to suffer if, God forbid, you're a victim, or if, God forbid, one of your family members is a victim, or, God forbid, you are a first responder, because you're not going to be able to really get home and take care of your pet. So having this plan in place where you could call Connie, or you could call Rose, or you could call Kieran and say, I am stuck at this horrible site and I need you to let the dog out, is so important. Remember, I said when my husband broke his shoulder, I implemented the MAAP plan because I was tired, I was emotional, I was taking care of my husband. But that isn't probably 1/100th the feeling that people have who are in Texas right now, or who are in Boston for the past 10 days. So I'd love to check in with all of you, because have you ever considered that your MAP plan would need to be implemented on such an incredibly unfathomable incident? I'll check in with you, Susan, first, since we started the conversation.
Actually, no. I mean, it's not something that I can even contemplate. It's really difficult to think of that, because, you know, I have to think not only of my dog, but also of my son. And, you know, I do try to be very careful and avoid situations where I think, you know, bad things can happen, but bad things can happen anywhere, anytime.
It seems these are not avoidable, because I was doing my grocery shopping and I was just a first, second or third grader or fourth grader in a school. So I was just doing that normal shit.
Right.
Little 10-year-olds are doing. So,
right.
You know, and as a parent, you know, you're so, I can't even fathom, right? You said I have to have concern about my son. I have to have concern about my family. And God, it just is so unfathomable. Jan, I'd love to hear what you have to say, because you have that mental health piece that you bring in all the time, which I so appreciate.
I think that, you know, I live about 40 minutes from Sandy Hook now, which was probably one of the first really horrible shootings that happened.
For little kids, I think it was Colorado for big kids and Sandy Hook for little babies.
Little babies. And, you know, when I think about that, because the park around the corner from me has a huge playground that's dedicated to the kids of Sandy Hook. And, you know, I pass it all the time. And, you know, and as I talk to friends and family members now with kids in school, you know, who have, you know, shooting scares or bomb threat scares or whatever. And, you know, it's not very far from home, and for almost any of us, you know, sadly as that may be.
That's why I brought it up tonight, because disasters, we think of them, and Connie, you and I have been talking about this forever, fire and flood and pestilence. However, these are things that seem to be something, if you have a pet, you really need to think about. I mean, the pandemic was one thing, but that was not something that was just, I mean, it was something we couldn't imagine because it had never happened before in our lifetimes. It happened in 1919, but not in our lifetimes per se. But this is an event that just simply, it just boggles the mind that things are going to happen when you least expect it. And that's why making a plan for your pet, both in life and in death, is really, really important, because they're depending on you, and they don't know that, you know, people are out there who probably need some really incredible mental health issues. However, Connie, what are your thoughts? Because I know we've talked about this with regular disasters.
Well, I actually dodged the real 9/11 by one day.
Wow.
I was the program manager on a variant of the F/A-18EF strike fighter, which is the U.S. Navy's current frontline fighter flying off carriers. I was program manager for the EA-18G, the airborne electronic attack, which means it takes care of integrated enemy air defenses. And that's the mission. I was due to go back and have a meeting with the Navy on September 10th, 2001 in the Pentagon. I was going to fly from LAX on Sunday, meet with the Navy, a quick one day in and out. And on Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, I was booked to return from Dulles to LAX on AA Flight 77 that instead went into the side of the Pentagon.
Ooh.
And and in fact, my former boss, who was the vice president of all the F/A-18 programs, was a retired Navy Rear Admiral, and his office was totally wiped out. If he had still been on active duty in the Pentagon, he would have been dead.
Wow.
So at any rate, the previous Friday, 2 days before I was supposed to fly back to DC, suddenly I got called away I had to cancel out on the trip because I had to stay for a corporate review of my program. And I said, oh my God, I really want to go. This is a really important meeting with the Navy. Oh, your people can go. And my people were going to stay in Washington for the entire week.
Thank God.
Thank God. They were fine. And in fact, a Northrop Grumman corporate jet had to go pick them up.
Right, because they weren't going anywhere. Right.
They weren't going anywhere. So, and of course, all the commercial flights were canceled, as everybody remembers. So that is, and forever after that, all through, all the OEF and OIF operations that we were doing in the Middle East, I was flying back and forth between LAX and Washington, D.C. to meet with the Navy and going to the Navy's test center in Patuxent River, Maryland. And I cannot tell you how many times my flight was either delayed or rescheduled because there was a terrorist alert at Dulles Airport.
Yeah.
So getting out of Washington, I mean, that was, ground zero, one of the ground zeros. So at any rate, I have lived it.
Yeah.
And, the prospect of never seeing family, friends, or dogs again, I've lived it. Yeah. So it's very, very real to me.
And so I'm so glad you have that plan in place because, we are living our lives because we're not going to sit still and not live our lives. However, having that plan in place, given the vagaries of what can happen in your life is key. Jan, you have your hand up.
I wanted to thank Connie, first of all. Thank you for what you do. I can.
Well, what I did, I'm retired.
Well, yeah, but what you did, I can very much relate because I actually worked for the New York City Department of Health after 9/11 doing anthrax testing.
Yeah.
For 4 or 5 years in full moon suit and on call every day, all night, And so when I think about, in a way, how naive I was because, I was a lot younger, but I would get called in every holiday in the middle of the night because all of a sudden they would find some sort of bomb threat letter or something. Right. And all of a sudden you're leaving and my dog was left at home. And thankfully I would come home eventually the next day, but now I would probably handle it a lot differently.
Yeah, because you know what? You just don't know. And what we don't know, we don't know. And
exactly.
We all are positive thinkers. So you're always going to think, I'm just going in, I'm going to go to work, I'm going to come home. I mean, that's what Connie was thinking when she was flying to DC. And then, oh shit, I can't go. Are you kidding? I want to go. So it really is fabulous that, both of you are safe and sound. I'm going to check in with Kieran. How about you? What are you thinking? Because you're so far away and there are so many thoughts and about what's different in the United States. I mean, President Biden said that there's something different about the United States than there is in the rest of the world. And so what are your thoughts, Kira? Because, you are the proponent, by the way, I've sent your link to a few people for One-Eyed Leo, but you wrote One-Eyed Leo to have people pay attention to what it means to get a pet. And then you're here every week, which I appreciate because you also want to talk about what it means to sustain that pet with you or beyond.
I suppose just Two quick comments, Debbie. One, I was listening to the radio today, and there's a lot of Irish people that live in the States, and then a few Americans that live in Ireland. And there was one very interesting comment, and I as I say, this is just something one of the Americans that was living in Ireland said, which was, and I don't know how you feel about it, or how Connie or everybody there feels about it, which was, the flags are at half mast today, or there's half mast in the White House.
Right.
And judging from what happened since Sandy Hook, you might as well keep them at half mast.
Yeah. You're absolutely right.
I thought that was very poignant. The other thing that sort of springs to mind is that all of the major events that hit us in our lives, we never see them coming, and we never have a chance to influence them before they happen or after they happen. And this was one of the most famous quotes from history about events is coming events cast their shadows.
Right.
And
they don't illuminate themselves, they cast shadows.
They cast shadows. And quite often when you're in the shadow, it's hard to actually read what the outline is or anything like it. But I suppose in my own life, one of the strangest things, just to connect it with dogs, was I spent about 5 years volunteering in rescue shelters, and every so often I'd come into the tea room with a little bit of blood in the hand or whatever. And I think all of the injuries over the years were getting caught in one of the gates or a bit of wire, just these minor things, and falling when you're going out for a run with one of the dogs. And when I left, but I think it was a year after I left the shelter, I was looking after one of the neighbor's dogs, who was a Malamute, which is one of the closest breeds to the wolf.
Yep.
And whatever happened, anyway, I got on his wrong side and he attacked me, and I had to get treated in the hospital for it. And it was the one dog I never saw coming. And that's, I suppose, that's the only thing I would say in there's a lovely piece of scripture called Desiderata. You're probably aware of it, and it's just always expect something to come, but you can never defend against it. And just the best you can do is be half ready.
That's right. And that's really the thrust of the MAAP plan. Be half ready, be ready, because you can never really predict what's going to happen to you or to someone in your family that may impact your ability to care for your pets. And so be ready, be half ready. I don't care if you don't make the perfect MAAP plan. I just care that you put that 3x5 card on your refrigerator with those numbers on it. I just told that to a group of attorneys who were talking about divorce. And I said, just make sure all of your clients put 3x5 cards on their refrigerator. They go, what are you talking about? I said, well, if something happens, they should have someone care for the pets if there's an event that happens. They go, we never even thought of that. Well, yeah, it's really important that you think about that, because, we all have these events that happen in our lives, that shape our lives, that change our lives, that we can't even fathom how the lives of the people who've lived 9/11 or who've lived Sandy Hook or lived Buffalo, or now who are living through Texas. I don't know how they even put one foot in front of the other, really, whether they are injured. Some were injured, some of them had children who were killed, or spouses who were killed, or mothers or fathers who were killed. And so when your pets are there, they're going to be your balm. Absolutely. They're going to help you get through it. But as I said, sometimes you really can't even get out of bed. And so if you have this MAAP plan in place with people there who can help you, it might be something they need to do to distract themselves. And it will be a great help for you and your family if you're going through either just the turmoil of the event or the tragedy of the event, because it really makes it it brought it home to me that disaster was not just, as we always talk about, fire, famine, hurricane, tornado, but these, as Kieran beautifully put, things that you can't prepare for, things that you can't see coming, that you only see their shadow once they've passed. So really, everyone here, I know it's 7:07. This time is flying by. I might just do an hour from now on, because I'm always talking over. But I know that everybody's time is precious and I want to wrap up. But I'm sorry to, talk about things that are so, they're in the news and they're depressing in the news. But for me, as the creator of this program, and really the person who wants you to care for your pets long-term, short-term, you have to be sort of smacked in the head. I told Susan before we started recording that I'm like Chicken Little. The sky is falling. The sky is falling. However, the sky seems to be falling a lot recently. I really want everybody to prepare for the pieces that are going to hit them from the sky, because, like Junie, I know all of you love your pets. You don't want anything to happen to them that you haven't planned for. And so what's your takeaway, Kieran, tonight? Because this has been something that really has not been as focused a MAAP community call as it is focused a global MAAP community call, like taking care of yourself and your pets.
I suppose the one takeaway is that when everything in life is going smooth, we just take it for granted that it's always going to be like that. And I think I'll just leave it at that. I think that's,
right.
that's tonight's takeaway.
Yeah, not to live in fear, but just recognize that if you can put a belt and suspenders on different phases of your life, so the members of your family, two-legged, four-legged, are cared for, really important. Susan, how about you? What's your takeaway?
Just life is what happens when you're making other plans. We never know what's ahead of us, just like Kieran said. And so that's kind of my mantra anyway. So
yep. So just make sure if you're having life, just make other plans that include making a plan for your pet. I know I'm a broken record. Jan, how about you?
Well, I was going to say, and your note that you feel like like the sky is falling, but there are like pleasant circumstances we don't plan on. So I'm thinking of a friend, the girl who watches Tonka when I'm away is actually pregnant and has 4 dogs. So what happens if you go into labor? Have you thought about I've had enough friends who are doulas, you don't know how long a delivery is going to take, and if you're married or have a significant other, they're not home. So on a good note, which is a great occasion, having a baby, right. But there are happy circumstances, which you can't plan for either.
Right. And that you need to plan for, because those dogs really have to pee, and mine were 24 hours long. So that would be really hard for my dog to hold.
Exactly.
So perfect. Absolutely. Connie, as always, wrap us up, honey.
Well, I think I would just echo what everybody has said, that life hits you squarely between the eyes a lot of times. And to the extent that we can, we have to plan for the worst. It's a horrible thing to contemplate, but if you really care about your dogs, and it's a psychological care too, if something happens to you. I mean, what happens if you don't come home? And I mean, my dogs are very, very bonded to me. And so, there should be some provision in the MAAP plan, not only for the dog's physical well-being, the pet's physical well-being, whatever the species, but also their psychological well-being, to let those who will be the caregivers know just how well or not well bonded. If the dog is more aloof, fine. But if the dog is extremely bonded to you, that dog's going to go through real trauma.
Right. And that's address the needs. That is absolutely top of the list. When you address the needs of your pet, you need to identify the relationship you have with them. Oh, this one will go with anyone. A car door opens, he's gone. Or this one would no more, like Junie, go with someone than fly to the moon ever. And so you really need to include that in the A of address the needs of your pet. You need to really describe them and describe your relationship with them, because Jan really wants to know the kind of Wheaten Terrier she's getting, if in fact she's the one who's going to get the Wheaten Terrier. And I love the way you put that, Connie, and I'm going to flip it on its head by saying, if we make a MAP plan, then we have the peace, P-E-A-C-E, of mind, that no matter what befalls us, there is someone that can step in, knows our pets, knows what we'd like to do with our pets, and can help us retain our pets or help our pets transition to a new life, a new family with, like Connie said, a complete identification of how those dogs are going to take to that change. I can tell you that when Sally, if she listens to this, hears this, Athena left without a look backward, never gave it a moment's thought. Roxy may have given me 5 minutes thought. However, she's living the life of Riley as well. Junie, not so much. Every time I leave him, he really does pine for me for many, many days. So you're absolutely right, Connie. Letting someone know the psychological impact of being away from you for a short time or maybe long term is really key when you're making your MAP plan and you're addressing the needs of your pet. So on that note, let's think of it as a positive that you're really creating this map that navigates the journey your pet takes when you can't care for it, so that they get that care that you really want them to get and they get a soft landing. So until next Wednesday, it'll be June 1st. I can't believe it's going to be June 1st. And I know Rose will probably tell me, why aren't you making these evergreen? I don't know, because I keep forgetting to make them evergreen. So it'll be June 1st. I'll be driving cross country. It'll probably be one of my roadside MAP plans, but I will be here. I will then be giving, this will be funny, I will then be giving a program at 8 o'clock at night for the Blue River Vet conglomerate on leadership, which I'm looking forward to. So until next week, guys, take good care of yourselves, take good care of your pets. I'm going to send my angels to take care of you. And this is Deborah Hamilton, Hamilton Law and Mediation, the Why Do Pets Matter podcast, which of course you know you want to listen to. And then of course, come again. We love having our MAP community here every Wednesday night at 6:30. Until then, kiss your pets for me.